Welcome to the Linux Saloon, a place to discuss tech, open source, and where Linux is always on tap. Each show will have a talk about some sort of a project relating to Linux or a Linux distribution. Sometimes we've even done BSD. We should do a BSD. Is that I'm up for a BSD sometime? No? Yes? Okay. We also talk about desktop environments or applications. We also chat about news or any variety of topics anywhere out there in the community. Anything that is Linux, tech, and open source related is on the table for discussion. I'm Nate, a Linux fitness and vintage tech enthusiast with an almost unhealthy obsession with the OpenSUSE project. Yeah, it's starting to feel like that's a little bit contrived now. It's forced. Whatever. And with me today, I have a fantastic group of people. I have Swift, Adam Grubbs, Eric, Jinda, Colin, Brian, and Aris. Thank you so much for being here. How is everybody?
Excellent.
Good.
Great.
Doing good.
Doing great, Nate. How are you?
How am I? I had a great day today. Just got done doing some baking, so there we go. I don't have to stay up late baking tonight. Great. For bake sale for a bunch of kids tomorrow. That's...
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Did you make anything good?
Cookie brownie bars with chocolate and caramel drizzled on the top of it. That's
wow.
So
making me hungry.
And actually, I brought some into work last week, I think it was. So, Brian, you missed that. Anyway, be sure to do the straw poll. If you have not yet done the straw poll, be sure to do it. And this week's straw poll: which of this old tech have you used at some point during your everyday life, or something like that? Did I say that right? I think your everyday life. And there's quite a few. And I checked off quite a few. So check that out. I think I do need a slide rule. That's what I learned from this and the discussion that happened right before the show kicked off.
The only one I haven't used is a mini disc.
I didn't use a
I
mini disc
skipped
either.
that one by.
Yeah, I don't even know what one is. I had to look it up.
Yeah, they just didn't last very long.
I think if you're in certain professions, it would have is more significant.
I think that's true, like things like zip drives too, right? I mean, I think in IT, a lot of us use zip drives, and a lot of normal people never even. It just sort of skipped them by. They were too expensive. Remember those cartridges being crazy expensive.
I remember I had to get one for college, but I don't want to skip the flow of this whole thing. I screwed up already. Sorry, Aris. I'm sure he'll talk to me about that later. Actually, he won't.
It's okay.
He's too nice for that. So tonight's an open mic night. We'll be talking about that. And the straw poll, of course. But first, what have we been doing in Linux and tech? Brian, I sort of badgered you on Friday to talk about this because I think it's a really cool thing you're doing. And I applaud this sort of work. I would like to... you're basically a developer now.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess I'll just start off. I'm kind of thrilled, I guess, that you've invited me to share my adventure of building a custom router using the Banana Pi R3 router board. So I recently moved for a work project. My family is still holding down the fort at the old house, so I was unable to bring most of my networking equipment with me. Since I couldn't bring my router, meant I was going to have to get a new one. After a little research, I got my hands on a Banana Pi R3 router board.
Sounds delicious.
Dude, sounds super good. And I have definitely looked up Banana Pi recipes since. Okay. It's hard to find an actual Banana Pi recipe. They're usually banana cream pie. So I wanted to build the system from the bottom up. I didn't really want to use the official OpenWRT images. So I ended up stumbling upon a script created by Eric Woodstra that's used to create arch images for the board. And considering the fact that I wanted to build this from the bottom up, it seemed like a natural fit. Like any normal person, I couldn't resist using this beast to set up a Minecraft server and play Doom. As you would probably expect,
I think those are two requirements, right?
Server,
like you just
yeah,
okay.
Yeah, dude. And so, as you would probably expect, the Minecraft experience was terrible. I was able to get the server running. I was able to use X forwarding to get the client running. I think it was like maybe 2 FPS. It was not a good time. Doom was actually somewhat playable, if hard to see what's going on. But this was all just kind of geeking out and having some fun before diving into the router's primary functionality. Once the geeking out phase was over, it's time to focus on turning the R3 into a fully functional router. My primary requirements were to be able to set up a site-to-site or like a branch office VPN connection. Or as a sort of a parallel to last week's show, I turned to WireGuard, the technology behind Tailscale. I had already been using this in a less optimized way, so I thought the transition was going to be relatively straightforward and simple. But I hit a roadblock pretty quickly when I realized that neither the Fuse file system or WireGuard were supported in the kernel. So I delved into the world of kernel compilation and built a new kernel that enabled both Fuse and WireGuard functionality. And this allowed me to copy remote files directly to the board and bring up WireGuard interfaces.
That's awesome.
So along this journey, I had an opportunity to assist and collaborate with other users. While browsing the GitHub repository for the build script, I stumbled upon an issue posted by a user who was seeking certain kernel configuration options. Interestingly, those were the options that I had compiled into the kernel. So I reached out to the user, shared the binaries, and guided him through the installation process. And although it worked, and the user confirmed that Tailscale was now working, I realized that we needed a better, more streamlined solution. Manually sharing kernel binaries isn't really feasible in the long run. It's just a silly thing to do. And nobody really downloads, like linux.deb or linux.rpm and installs it manually. It's just, that's not how it works. And on top of that, if you just use the binary, next time you update and there's a kernel update, it's just going to overwrite your changes anyway. So it really doesn't. So at that point, the build script creator shared insights on how he built his kernel and pointed me the right direction. With some tweaks to his package build and the help of some Python scripts I wrote, I was able to automate the build process, making it more efficient. The build system can now check for new kernel releases, download the source code, compile, and create Pacman installable packages. And while that makes packages that can be manually installed, I don't really want to stop there. I want to simplify the installation process further. I mean, yeah, no one really downloads a kernel package just to install. You use your package manager. So I set up a custom package repository, making it easier for users to just add the repo and install and manage the kernel and headers.
Do you have do you have a link to this repository that you're willing to share?
Yeah, I can share it in the chat.
Cool, excellent.
No problem. Well, yeah, now that the core functionalities are in place, I'm getting pumped to push the boundaries further. My next focus is going to be on adding tools that will actually streamline the configuration of the firewall and routing features of the board. And really, I'm just talking about a standard web interface that you would find on any router. So right now, it's a little bit tedious. That's really what I got for you guys.
Well, that's really cool. And I mean, enabling other users to do more things with their Banana Pi, that makes it even cooler. Yeah. So how difficult was it for you to compile the kernel? Is this the first time you compiled the kernel, or you probably played with this before on other systems, I'm guessing?
No, not really. Like I did a little bit. I tried to figure out how back in the day, like when you boot a Raspberry Pi, it shows all the raspberries at the top of the screen. And I've seen penguins at the top of the screen. I tried figuring out how people did that before. I was never successful. So this is the first time I really got into it and followed through, I guess.
And do you have other single board computers that you do sorts of fun things on, like Pis or like Raspberry Pis too? Or I know you had Pis, yeah.
Yeah. So when the original Raspberry Pi was announced back in like 2011 or 2012 or whenever that was, I was like, there's no way this thing, this isn't going to happen. It's crazy. It came out, I got one, played with it nonstop. At the time, I couldn't afford other single board computers, although I was all over like watching which ones were being announced and coming out and whatever. And I was like, dude, I want these. And it actually, to the point to where I was like, I need a better job. I can't afford these things. I have to go get a better job. And that's That's what happened. And the funny part though is that like I got a better job and started having more money to play with these things and never really got too much into anything other than Raspberry Pis until a couple months ago.
Yeah, I've looked at the Banana Pis before because just the availability of Raspberry Pis just hasn't been there. And this is actually pretty compelling now that I know that there's lots of people. There's some momentum now behind it, and obviously you're part of that momentum. That's really very cool to see, and it opens up possibilities for other things too. Because a little, especially like Fuse and WireGuard, having that available, that really opens up a lot more, flexibility and functionality now that you've done that. So this is the oldest.
Right.
This is the oldest Pi I have here. Pi 2.
Oh, the yellow video output.
Yeah, composite.
Yeah.
It died. Has anybody else here done similar work with kernel work that Brian has? New? I imagine Adam has. Adam seems to do everything.
No, nothing anywhere near that interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, I don't know that it's even really that interesting. After getting Doom running, it was like, oh, okay, this thing's, cool.
What's the difference? What's the difference between a Banana Pi and a Raspberry Pi? Is there a huge difference, or just a different model? Is it?
So the Banana Pi is sort of a knockoff. It's like a cheap Chinese clone. And there's also like an Orange Pi. Dude, there's a whole bunch of clones. They all use slightly different chipsets, so the compatibility is not really there.
Yeah, the big thing was like when since the Raspberry Pis were hard to get and everything, these clones were a good alternative.
Okay. Yeah, like good enough. Yeah.
Right.
So I only got into this one because I had actually seen this router board in the past and was like, well, that's neat. I built something with that, but never compelling enough to buy one until I needed a router. And I was like, dude, I'm just going to go for it. Give it a shot.
Yeah. No, that's a really neat project to tackle. I mean, it's not one I would have tackled. I don't think I'd have that kind of patience. But no, it's neat. And I'm surprised by the absolute array of boards, Banana Pi single board computer options that they have. And this is just crazy, the number of things.
Yeah, they got a lot more stuff. They got a router.
Yeah.
They got all kinds of different things. I didn't know they had routers.
Yeah, and actually just in the last week or two, they announced the R4. So that's cool, but also a little bit frustrating. It was like if I would have known, I would have waited a little bit longer, but it's fine.
That's the way it goes, though.
I'll probably get one eventually.
So you got the Wi-Fi 7 router board, or which one did you get?
I think it's 5.
5?
Yeah, I think it's 5.
As somebody who has a Wi-Fi 6E router and Wi-Fi 6E chipset, I never get a 6 gigahertz signal. So like when I hear about Wi-Fi 7, I'm like, yeah, I feel like I have to be like right up on the router to get that kind of signal. But if I'm that close, I may as well just plug it in. I don't know.
You're not holding the beams right, Adam. You gotta take use of the beam.
They are not forming the way that they said they would. They said they had a beam forming, and they are malformed.
Yeah. You gotta mold it like clay.
So yeah, when I hear like the newer Wi-Fi stuff, it's like, yeah. I mean, it's nice if you're like directly line of sight of it, I guess. But most people,
no obstacles in the way, nothing to obstruct the signal. Yeah.
So Wi-Fi 5 seems fine. Yeah.
Is setting up multiple APs just all over your roof, just in every room, and just, I mean, it's not a good solution, but
only
it
they
would
didn't
work.
interfere with one another. But I'm all about absurd solutions, though. So you're on the right path.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the fact that you're building your own router, I mean, you could potentially almost spin your own Banana Pi router distribution then, like a spin of sorts. And that might be, that might be something I'd look at, actually, quite honestly.
The thought has crossed my mind. I don't know if I have the bandwidth or patience to follow through all the way, but we'll see.
Right.
We'll see where it goes.
Support it, right?
Right. And then it becomes, instead of like I was intensely interested in this for a month, to now I have a thing I have to do forever, which maybe is good. I don't know.
Well, there might be other people that jump in with you. I mean, there's you build there's
Right.
enough momentum behind Banana Pi and there's enough people in the world that use those particular boards. That's just going to add more people, more eyes to the code potentially, and more fixes. Which means that you're going to be doing a lot more, merging and whatever else.
Yep, just a different type of work. It's still, all involved. It's all part of it.
Well, very
Yep.
cool. Does anybody else have any other really cool projects like this that they're working on? Adam, have you done something else?
Nowhere near anything that cool.
Yeah, that is pretty. It's pretty.
Yeah,
dope.
I think you just shot our wad for this show. Good night, everybody.
Dude, I was over here thinking, I'm like, man, I don't need to talk about this to anybody. It's not even that interesting. Telling Nate about this last week or something, he's like, you don't have a choice. You have to talk about this on the
You don't
show.
have a choice.
You're doing.
And I was like,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah, that's great. So then you have a repository set up so other people can check that out or whatever else and someplace. Because I wonder if it's not such a, because you said it's Arch based, right? It's based on okay.
Yep. Arch Linux for ARM or ARM. So it's not like the official Arch, but it's like the semi-official, ARM release.
Okay. Right. Yeah,
There's no real website to that link I just put in the chat, but it just shows the files.
That's really all I need. Sweet. Yeah, and I think I was telling you a little bit about like if you wanted to build this stuff out and host it with keys and everything, the open build service could be a potential destination, a home for it, because the OpenSUSE project basically hosts all kinds of stuff that's not even OpenSUSE related, and someone might start adding other architectures and such to it, like other distributions as well. So you could start out as Arch and get cross built over to other things. So,
Right.
like OpenSUSE. Saying.
Yeah, dude, I'm not at a level to understand how to make that work. I did look into the open build system, or is that what it is, OBS?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I did look into that a little bit this morning. I didn't really have a whole lot of time, but I will dig into it a little more and see if it's going to be useful or not.
Yeah, I mean, if it's too complicated, too much work, for how you want to work, then obviously it's not going to work. But that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so it's worth knowing that it exists.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any other projects like that, like the open build service, where just anybody can just use it.
Yeah, I don't know. So I left this out of the story, but while building the kernel, originally I compiled it directly on the Banana Pi board itself, which took like 3 hours, which is fine, I guess. I mean, it's not a super powerful computer, but it was a while. Eventually, I was able to set up distributed compiling, so it compiles on a virtual machine, and it's down to like 32 minutes or something now.
Oh, that's much better.
Much better. Yeah, super cool. I didn't even know that was a thing before, I don't know, 2 weeks ago.
But now you can't go out and get a burger, come back, and then then just sit down and be ready. Now I can't leave home.
I might have just enough time, depending on where I go.
You have to drive fast, and gotta be careful.
Yeah, there's a Popeyes that's like the closest business to where I live.
Mm-hmm.
So if I get Popeyes,
oh, okay, yeah,
like I might be able to pull it off.
Go with the
depending
spicy.
on who's working and how long the line is.
Right.
By the time the dehydration from the biscuits goes away, then you should be okay.
Right.
Yeah.
We got to smother the honey on there, otherwise it's not edible. It'll just suck the moisture out of your mouth.
How greasy am I going to allow my keyboard to get? I think that's the real question.
So I have a rule about that in my house.
If it ain't shining, then you ain't working.
Right.
Not from the speed on how quickly you slap those keys, but how much.
Yeah, I didn't get a mechanical keyboard to not pull the keycaps off and clean them.
Right.
Exactly. You gotta do like all those other YouTubers where you watch them, pull all the keys off and then put it in some Dawn soap in the kitchen sink and let it.
Yeah, I actually did that recently. Cleaned out my keyboard that way, and I searched for about 25 minutes for my key puller and never found it. So it was butter knife and raw fingers for me.
Yeah. Yeah. So before I moved here, I cleaned all of my keycaps. put them all back on, and I don't know, I put them in the order I thought they went. And I'm a little bit disappointed that I got like several keys in the wrong locations. You know, in day to day, it doesn't matter. I just type and I don't notice. But when I'm like one-handed Control C, Control V, dude, those keys aren't in the right spots. Control X is not Control X. The multiplication and division symbols are in the wrong locations. So if I'm using the calculator and I'm looking, it's like I divided instead of multiplied, dude. It's been 6 months and I still haven't fixed it. So I guess it's not that big of a deal, but yeah.
That's hilarious. Yeah, I've been taking the keys off of my my computer here. I haven't had the need to. I almost daily wipe it down with a microfiber cloth because there's something wrong with me. But I'm sure there's probably little bits of something now in the base of it.
I give mine a nice little acetone bath every evening.
Oh, that sounds lovely.
Is that their bonding time?
Yeah, I mostly type on a flat surface now, so.
Oh, on a glass pixel?
No, it's just the keyboard's gone. It's just a puddle now.
Oh, okay.
Acetone every night.
Right. But it's clean. No longer functional, but it's clean. Well, excellent. Well, thank you very much, Brian. I appreciate you sharing that. And please, if you have any like updates, I would love to hear about them because these kind of projects get me all excited. And, you know, I feel like they're very empowering, and they're probably empowering for other people too. So that will be one of the featured items in the title after I edit this thing down, for sure.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, dude, when there was somebody on GitHub that I helped, that was the key part right there, because I would have just been like, yeah, I'm done. You know, that was cool to figure out. And then someone else is like waiting for this thing to work. And it's like, well, that's extra cool. You know, I've never had somebody open an issue and just be like, hey, when can you fix this? It's like, man, that's all right.
You know, that's how it starts. That's how it starts, and then you become the next distribution maintainer of Banana Pi routers. You know, that's just what happens.
You're obligated to title the episode Banana-Rama.
Let me write that down. Banana. Is that a trademarked phrase though?
I can make it
a trademark phrase.
Not if you use a hyphen.
Maybe Banana Pi.
I don't know if it is or not. I think you'll be fine.
Yeah. Well, if I get a takedown, I'm blaming you, Adam.
That's fine.
Or maybe do Banana Pi Rama. This way, I can't. That might be the way to do it.
Okay, I'll let you know if it's copyright by the end of the show.
Okay, good. All right. Well, if you have not done so, do that straw poll very quickly, because Aris is going to take us away and tell us what are the results of said straw poll. It's probably going to change as he's doing it, which would be even more awesome.
It always does. Kind of weird. The way it does the percentages, that doesn't really say, I think, much of anything, I guess.
You can probably just do votes.
So I just go by, like, I'll just say majority. So almost everybody has used a. Oh, I'll go with the question first. I haven't said that. Which of this old tech have you used at some point during your everyday life? And I did say something that you actually use, not just know about or have seen. And almost everybody has used a compact disc player. Almost everybody has used a VCR, video cassette recorder. Almost everybody has used the audio cassette player. Almost everybody has used a 3.5-inch floppy disk. Also a CRT monitor. And a portable compact disc player, otherwise known as CD Walkman. Almost everybody has used that. Television as a computer monitor, most people have used. Record player also. Rotary phone. Typewriter. Portable audio cassette player, the original Walkman. The majority has used. The majority has used 5.5-inch floppy disk. And half of the people who responded have used an 8-track player. Less than half have used a slide ruler. Less than half have used a mini disc player. And I would say like a quarter have used an Abacus.
I have to ask, did anyone ever have a portable CD player that wasn't absolute garbage?
No.
I
Oh
had
my
one.
goodness. I had like 3 of them and they'd show in the commercial like shaking them. Oh, they can't skip. I'm like, yeah, right.
So the way they work it later on is they will read the disc and like save it to memory and then just play the song. And then
Oh,
once the next track, they would read that and then spin up and then spin down.
okay.
Yeah, it
So
does kind of seem like they got better over time.
Gotcha. I must have just had the older ones then. Yeah.
I think a young Eric was at the mercy of PennDOT at the time, right? So
Oh my goodness.
yeah, your
Yeah.
roads would have
Well, see,
really
that's why the
ran
8-track
out
was
that one, yeah.
yeah. Well, that's why 8-tracks were superior. You could never get to the song you wanted, but it didn't skip.
It's true.
The
cassette was
you
pretty-
couldn't skip. Yeah.
and I didn't know this about 8-tracks, but apparently they would play it in endless loop. And
Yeah.
so it was
Yeah.
ahead of its time. I mean, you couldn't do that with like a
You-
record player.
You could flip between the tracks, but you couldn't actually get. I mean, you could fast forward and flip between
Yeah.
tracks, but it was kind of impossible. You sort of just listen to it.
So when I was in high school, I was that weird kid that did have the mini disc player,
Nice.
Okay.
the portable mini disc player. And it was awesome. It was everything I wanted and more.
Could you fit an entire album on one?
Depending on how you encoded it. So it was sort of like how you had it on a VCR with like SP, LP, EP, that
Yeah,
kind of
yeah, yeah.
stuff. And so you could encode them at like lower bit rates to fit more on the mini disc. So if you had like just the normal quality, you could fit probably about 2 to 3 albums on the ones that I had. And you could also, if you like encoded more, like I think the lowest bit rate, you could have like 12 or 13 albums on there.
Wow. Okay.
But if I mean, I usually did that because my headphones sucked, so it really didn't matter if I had highest quality at all anyway. But yeah, it was great, and it ran on one AA battery, and it lasted like 2 weeks
Wow.
on a AA battery.
Well, so now that would be a huge advantage because portable CD players ran on
Yeah,
2
chewed
AA's
through them.
and
Yeah,
they
the only
they
thing worse than
died,
those
yeah.
was a Game Gear.
Oh.
Did they use mini discs in camcorders?
I don't think so. They had
They
like
kinda-
Okay.
do you remember those old camera? They had the Mavicas or whatever that used like a mini CDs. Like so you take the pictures and then afterwards it would burn it to the
Yeah.
CD in the camera.
Yeah, yeah.
But I don't ever remember seeing using mini discs for it. No.
So
I
were
must be
mini
thinking the wrong
discs,
thing.
were
Yeah.
those literally just like small CDs or was it a different format?
It was a
Because
different
I-
format. Yeah.
Okay, because I know that I had gotten hardware in the past that came with drivers on like a miniature CD.
Yeah, no, they were
Right.
not. They were not those. They were smaller than those. But in terms of like space, they could fit more.
Gotcha.
They're more akin to. Are you familiar with the PSP UMDs?
I don't know.
Maybe?
No,
Okay,
not off the top
so-
of my head.
So they were like little CDs that looked like a floppy, but like so like it wasn't the raw disc. Like it was in like its own little cartridge. It looked like kind of like a floppy, but like an optical disc inside. And so you'd
Mhm.
like insert it like a cartridge into the thing and close it. So it was
Isn't it
all
what-
this weird hybrid of like it looked like a floppy, but it was optical media, but you inserted it like a tape player, and like it was this weird like combination of experiences.
Genius.
Isn't that the weird thing that Neo had in Matrix? Like that's what he was giving. the
Yeah, I
guy
think
with
so,
the-
probably, yeah.
Okay, yeah, because it looked so futuristic in 1999.
Right.
Especially with
Yeah.
the translucent cases, you know?
Yeah,
Everything
yeah,
was
yeah. I had a bunch of
You
transparent.
different
could see the
colors.
disc inside.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. It was
I think
There was a-
mini
ahead.
CD is kind of like what the GameCube had, right? The smaller discs.
No, those were DVDs actually.
Those
like
were
mini
DVDs?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
It's
yeah,
like
these,
Crap.
yeah, this
It
I
was a
like to
proprietary format, I think, for the
Yeah.
GameCubes.
Mm.
So the what was interesting is they had a bunch of like nice features. Like they had an optical in, so like you could record like losslessly sort of from like like a DVD player or something that had optical out. So you could like record a CD from that to the mini disc player, as well as analog in. So like you could almost like dubbing a tape off of the radio or something, right? There's a similar idea, but you were recording it onto optical media. And it was such a cool little device. I loved it. I actually like recorded the audio from like Fellowship of the Ring to listen to the movie while I was walking to school. and like
Oh my
that kind
goodness.
of thing.
I went to a planetarium over the weekend, and the music that they were using between the intermission was Lord of the Rings. I
Another
was just like,
audience.
why do I know this? I'm like, oh, nice. Anyway, you sparked that.
But yeah, so like
No one else
Minidisc,
was getting
cool
it.
stuff. Minidisc was
That's
really cool
awesome.
stuff.
So
Although
you
the software
mentioned,
sucked, but that was a different
oh,
story.
really?
Like yeah, it was like some stupid like Sony like Sony software, and they had their proprietary codec called like A-Track, like alpha, ATRAC. And so you
Okay.
had to like encode it in their way, and it was kind of a
Gotcha.
pain to work with, much like iTunes at the time, like you have to just kind of eat it and use their software, but they were still cool.
You brought up the long play VHS tapes. I had there's probably like a 120 that had like 8 movies on it.
Right, and they all look like butt.
Jeez.
Yeah, and they were terrible. But you know what? I also watched them over and over and over again, so they actually got worse over time.
Right. Yeah.
I had the shoebox full of like 8 tapes with, the 20 movies that I watched over and over and over as a, 10-year-old.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I remember having to explain to my dad the difference between the modes, and I'm like, Dad, you're not going to want to record our family memories in SLP. Trust me. Just buy
Right.
more
But I
tapes.
can fit so much on there.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
Just buy more tapes, dude.
Right. Oh my goodness.
Now, did anybody here use video CDs ever?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, it was a very short-lived period of time.
I'm not going to say where I got them from, but they all had Arabic subtitles for everything that I had. So.
Weird. Yeah.
Yours too, huh?
Yeah.
I think it was just a feature.
I think it was, yeah. It was like 2004-ish, and you're probably like, why would I have that? Like, so I was in a location in the world where you couldn't buy movies, and except for bootleg movies. So I did at the time. They were all terrible quality, like every one of them, and but it's like, $2 for this or nothing. Choose. What's your choice? And so sometimes I went with nothing. But we had like the PS2, PlayStation 2 would play those, and so you could watch video CDs on PS2s. That was pretty cool. But like it took like at least 2 discs, and it was like sub VHS quality, or about that anyway. And
yeah, it was about VHS quality. Yeah.
But they were digital. They were digital.
So digital as opposed to analog garbage. So
exactly. Like
No,
laser
So
would have been, laser disc would have been much better in its analog.
oh, for sure.
Except that they're this big.
Never.
That was always yeah. So Nate, have you ever tried to explain a rotary phone to your kids? Because my daughter just looked at me like I was crazy. She's like, wait a minute. So you spun it around and let go, and then did that a bunch of times. I was like, yeah, it was a thing.
Yep. I haven't yet.
It's funny you mentioned that. My mom and my sister were on vacation, and my sister's kid, he was probably like 6 at the time, 5 or 6, and they were gonna be lavish and order some room service. So they picked, my nephew had picked up the phone, and he handed it to my mom, and he's like, "Here, you talk, I'll text." I was like, "What are you talking about?" He meant like dial the thing, because like all he ever saw was people texting on a phone like that. So he thought that's what the buttons were for, was for texting.
That's
He's like, you talk, I'll text. So he just starts hammering away.
Oh man. Yeah, this list definitely brings home just how much the world has changed in such a short amount of time.
If I'm not mistaken, the each rotation, right? It pulled you to like a different like tone, right? Like, so when you went around, it cut off at a certain point and you let go. So the length of the signal was like
is it
different, right?
It was actually
It was a pulse.
This is the number of ticks. Yeah.
Okay. And that's why it had to go back. And
yeah, it literally had a ring of contacts. So as you brought it around to 3, it and then 5,
Perfect.
Yeah. So when I was little, we had a phone that looked like a rotary phone, but it wasn't. It just had buttons in the spots. So it took me a long time for it to click that that's not what that technology was. I don't know why we had that.
We had that old kitchen phone with the 40-foot cord and the
Oh god.
green, it
Yep.
was
Yep.
avocado green.
Yes.
Gets all tangled up.
Yep.
Yep.
Talking on the phone, and, and
Uh,
your parents, of course, are looking and listening.
Oh
what we're
yeah,
talking
or
about,
there's someone
Yeah.
else that'd
They'll
pick up
pick
the
it
other
up on the
line.
other
Oh, yeah.
phone.
Yep.
Yeah.
There you go.
Oh yeah, you guys. I took apart a phone and then I took the speaker connectors and plugged them into a stereo so I could listen through my stereo and disconnected the microphone. And I would totally just eavesdrop on my sister, and she couldn't hear me because there was no microphone.
Nice.
So it was seamless.
That's hilarious.
Oh god.
Look, sometimes
Oh.
that's what you have to do.
So Abacus, someone was asking about Abacus. I actually just learned how to use it like a couple months ago. My daughter got one just as it was like a toy basically. And I was like, I've always wondered how these work. And so I watched a couple YouTube videos. They still in India, they showed this video of all these kids. They have contests on how fast you can compute a like ridiculously long number using an abacus, and these kids are just whizzing through it. So it's still, even today, it's like a really efficient way to calculate really large numbers. So yeah, it's pretty fascinating actually. If you've never looked up, like, because it's obviously ancient technology, but it's still relevant, and there's still cultures that use it today. So like India. So
I wonder if anybody ever used that for like keeping track of people entering like a fair or something, to keeping some total of people entering. Like it seemed it would be very efficient that way. So I was wondering if somebody ever used it that way. Nobody ever.
Yeah, like a
said anything.
turnstile counter thing.
Yeah, kind of like a clicker.
Yeah.
You know, those clickers that for.
Oh
keeping
yeah,
track.
yeah, where they like traffic surveys and things like that.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean the whole premise is that it compounds. So the first row is 1 to 5, and then it's 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and then it's 25, 50, 75, 100, and you just keep bumping them as you go through. And some of them are larger than others, and they have more places between the different, sections. And yeah, really, I mean, it's a computer in the sense that, it allowed you to
Old
calculate,
bits.
yeah, exactly. So Aris, I think you could, as you're going through and just counting people to just, sort of flip and get through and just keep.
Yeah, it seems you could do it that way. About the going back to that rotary phone, I think I heard one time said in a YouTube video that it was very important to have a short, like a small number for phone number, because you can
Mhm.
imagine the difference between calling 1 and calling the 9 and waiting for the thing to roll back.
Mhm.
So like
Yeah.
all the big cities got like an area code that was very like short to 1. It was like 1 or 2 or something like that.
Mm.
Because there were so many numbers that way, you would want them to have very short numbers as an area code.
When I was young, you didn't have to dial the area code.
Yeah, same here.
And so it was just 7 digits, right? And then we got big enough that we needed 2 area codes. And so when you started to have to dial the area code, we still had rotary at that point. And it was a pain to do. It was an extra 3 numbers and you had to wait. So anyway, yeah, that was a real thing.
Did anybody here go through the time when you had, they're transitioning from pulse to tone, and when you actually hit, so like some touch tone phones also did pulse, so when you pushed it would do the, whatever the sounds. Yeah, I remember.
Yes. Yep.
Those are good times right there, because like some, so you had the same wait time between pushing them, but you had,
I think
Were you saying,
remember
Dylan?
people kept the pulse around because it was cheaper to have the pulse and the tone, I think. And then they gave them a time where they actually forced everybody to move over, because obviously it was costing the phone company to have that service like that.
right.
Hmm.
I think
You remember
there was
you
a
could troll people if
Oh,
if
okay,
you
fine,
if
fine.
they if you didn't hang up, if they hung up and you didn't hang up, they couldn't make a phone call. Do you remember that?
Oh, Schickel, welcome.
Thank you.
Dale, welcome. Swift, sorry I was rude. Welcome.
Yeah, because I had this set for when we recorded distro hoppers, and that's the level I use. But apparently in live,
Mhm.
It's
needs to
Zoom.
be a little higher.
It's just Zoom.
It could be Zoom with the
Yeah,
auto
that's
adjusting
probably Zoom.
volume.
Yeah, Zoom, if it's on auto, it will always make it quiet. It's
Okay,
annoying.
it could be the mic adjustment tool that I forgot to uncheck, where it automatically adjusts your gain.
That's probably what
Right,
it is.
that's
I can go back and turn that off. But I remember the touch tone. I think I mentioned this in one of the group chats in the Telegram, that my grandmother was the last neighborhood to get converted over to a touch tone. I mean, bought her a cordless phone that had that feature, and then I think a friend of mine told me the reason I added a voltage to all the phones, because the phones back then had a black box mounted to the wall, and that was the ringer, because in the old Western Electric phones, the ringer wasn't in the phone. The early versions of them didn't have ringers in the phone. All they had, I mean, she had one phone in the house, because one black box, one phone, one ringer. This house was built like in the 1850s, 1860s, so it was retrofitted for a lot of modern conveniences. And yeah, I think, and one other thing I wanted to mention when I was trying to adjust my audio there, I think that ticking, if I'm not mistaken, because a friend of mine, we've talked about this before many years ago, wasn't the ticking sort of associated with, like, don't quote me on this, but it was like 150 hertz or some type of like 100 hertz or something tone that it sent back to the switching office? Because I remember we were talking about something like that, because we were talking about party lines a couple years ago, and how you could always tell when someone came into the party line, because you could hear before they came in, because you had to hit the receiver and then hit the receiver again, if I remember correctly, because it's been so long ago since I've used party lines. But
does anybody know what a party line is? Everybody know what that is? There was a way of providing phone service where, like, you literally shared a circuit with other people, and you had to, like, say, "Is there anyone else on?" You know, in hope that nobody would. It was a really weird system. Yeah,
It was like a chat room for phones.
kind of. Yeah, kind of.
How does the encryption work on that?
Yeah,
Right. Not even a thought.
Well, that's that whole phone freaking thing. That was like a big deal. Like, for a long time, people knew how to send certain pulses and tones, and you could, like, override systems and, like, all kinds of crazy
It's
stuff.
all just physics at that point.
You remember the
it
long
was
distance
very rudimentary.
service? Remember that
everything.
The 1010 321
220
or
1010 220
or those short codes.
Yep.
A friend of the family worked at the phone company and had retired when they did after he was part of the transition into the touch tone, and that's when he finally retired. I can't remember how many decades he worked, 20, 30 years, but yeah, he told me that a lot of these they call them quick codes, were originally used for like executives and people, and for technicians to test the phone line. It's sort of like the short codes that they'll put into our phones. They used to be, before we got the smartphones, they used to be the star 228, and then there was star something else on the cell phones where you could actually call yourself to make sure your phone was working, or something like that. I can't remember, but he said that these short codes, and then the phone company, he doesn't know why, but they stopped using them. They started to go into calling. That's what it was. They started going to calling cards. They actually gave a person an actual dedicated call. I remember a dedicated calling card. And what happened was, some entrepreneurial people said, "Hey, we got these quick code things. I wonder if we could wrap a service around this." And the phone company is like, "Have at it."
I wonder if that's kind of like what became of the like when you text, something to 45364 or whatever combination, like 5-digit combination. It's kind of like an offshoot of that sort of because you just text to like a 5-string number, something, and somehow that goes magically to some place. Anyway, that kind of made me think of that.
Yeah, so I don't know where you would get those, but you can just buy those numbers and register like a business that utilizes it. So I know with this, there's a service called Twilio, and you can get those through there and run a service like that.
I've heard of
So
Twilio.
where they get them from, I don't know. Yeah, Twilio's neat.
Yep.
It's all right.
Yeah, especially if something's gone wrong. Get notifications.
I was just gonna say, it doesn't happen over the network, well, depending on what you're doing, but most of you guys' phones, and it changes depending on the OEM, has a whole slew of numbers you can dial into the dialer, and it will bring up information on your current, like what tower you're connected to, what bands it's using, whether you're using like 5G standalone or it's 5G piggybacked, all of that stuff. You can get like really nitty-gritty details on, not only your cellular connection, but your Wi-Fi connection. You could even get like diagnostics for SMS and stuff like that. It's really, really cool stuff.
Wait, how do you get this?
I think it's with the pound keys.
Yeah, it's like pound asterisk, like 39 something asterisk pound. You could Google, there's one for Samsung and then one for Google. And then they all have their own subdivided codes.
Okay.
But
I'm sure Motorola doesn't have that.
They do, yeah.
No, I'm just gonna guess they don't.
Oh. I like it.
So I was going to mention some of the replies or pseudo replies, I guess. I don't know. When it said, you can really tell the age of the members in this group with this poll, winking emoji. I have used all except for the slide rule and Abacus. Though I was shown how to use a slide rule, I just never used it. And then somebody replied to that and said, exactly the same answers for me. I feel like Aris is just calling us old. Winking emoticon. And then I replied back, can I call you old without calling myself old? Question mark. Somebody said, mini disc player, ... And somebody said, I used the slide rule one time in elementary school. We had a math nerd none for a teacher.
Sweet.
And the final message is, somebody said, I checked everything in this poll. I'm old, LOL.
That's hilarious. Yeah, I think I've never actually used a slide rule. I've used an Abacus, but it was a toy, and I didn't know it was a toy. But I think it was divided. It had like rows of 10 though, not 5. I thought Eric anyway, it was rows of 10, and so someone explained to me that was like the first form of computer, and I'm like, huh? But anyway,
there are different kinds of Abacus.
Okay.
So some of them do have 5, and some of them have 10. Yeah.
Okay. Did anybody here have an answering machine with the tape? You had like with the big chunky knob.
Answering machine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that what I said?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time recording messages to make it perfect.
Remember when you were able to directly connect to voicemail systems rather than it just being recorded off the end of a call? So like you can call voicemails directly and leave a message, and you could just like fill up somebody's tape with garbage.
No.
Yeah.
We
Cool.
did this trick in IT when I worked back in IT, and there was a disgruntled end user that wasn't happy because they didn't get their computer back, and people were taking, drawing straws who is going to call them and get, yelled at. What I found out is you could actually send voicemails directly to them without calling them.
Yes.
And they looked at me and they're like, I remember Barry, who's one of my coworkers. He's like, "You deserve a raise." He said that was awesome.
It's so good. It takes me every ounce of strength not to use that at work when I don't want to call a customer because
I can understand that.
It's so good.
I have a hard time checking my voicemail. I don't know what my problem is. There's something really difficult for me, like to listen to voicemails, and I don't know, like some sort of like a mental thing. I don't know, but like it's like I loathe it. I'll gladly read voicemails, like when I get one, but actually listen to a voicemail, I have zero motivation in doing that.
For me, I
Yeah,
look at the voicemail and my thought is, "You're not real," and that's it.
Yeah, dude, I've got the same issue. I won't listen to them, and I see I have a voicemail from somebody I know. I just call them back,
Yeah.
and then half the time they're like, "Oh, did you get my voicemail?" It's like, "Yeah," but I don't know what it was about. I figured I'd call you back.
Like, dude, send me a text message. Don't call me.
Yeah.
That's
like-
that's actually me with
Right.
email. Like I can't stand email. I
Really?
just hate it. I'll take a Teams
Yeah.
message or Slack message or any of that any day, but I hate email.
I would still prefer email over phone calls most of the time.
Oh yeah,
It
definitely,
depends.
especially for the CYA aspect. But
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. It depends on what it is exactly. Sometimes I don't know. Sometimes making a phone call is just way faster than trying to explain everything in paragraphs.
Sure.
It just
Yeah,
depends.
and like Teams or whatever, Zoom, like it's not the same. Like it's kind of a hassle to like call people on a voice chat thing than it is on a telephone.
Yeah, or you get a Teams message back and it's just yes. It's like yeah, dude. Like yes, okay, cool.
or
Can
my-
you explain it, please?
My favorite
It's like-
thumbs up emoji. You get
yeah,
those
yeah,
a lot.
oh, yeah.
And you're like, yeah, that really is the response I wanted. Thanks.
Yeah, it's like I guess I'm calling you now. We're gonna talk about it.
Yep.
That's
Have you ever seen the visual voicemail? I'm not sure if it's an
Mm.
AT&T feature or if it's
I think it's what AT&T
Or-
calls theirs. Yeah.
or a Pixel feature on my Pixel, because I could actually see a live transcription of them leaving the message, and I have the option of picking up the call, just disconnecting them, or just eavesdropping.
Yeah. Right now that's I think right now it's a Pixel exclusive and iOS is getting that later in the year.
Yeah.
Um,
iOS 17.
It's a really cool feature.
Yeah, the screen call thing is so great.
Oh man.
Yeah, I use the screen call on the Googles. The Google, like, this is, and it's really fun. Like, if I do that, they hang up almost immediately. Like, well, perfect.
Right.
Also-
Yeah.
Scammer.
If you're not willing
So
to tell
good.
me why you called, you're not willing to talk to me.
Exactly.
And now that voicemails are their own sort of like separated thing, unless you're somehow calling a landline with a physical recorder, you can, if you're like sending a voicemail, if you just press #3, it'll re-record the voicemail. So that's pretty cool. You can just start over if you mess up.
Yeah, that is handy. There's people who have Verizon. You can do that.
But I'd rather get mad and indignant on the phone than re-record it.
Hang up, call them again, and send another one.
Right.
Right. I've considered like calling people like who screen calls, like be like with their actual voicemail and stuff. Just call them and just like read a book and just like keep calling back to leave voicemail with the rest of like as I'm reading the book.
Yeah, like reading Tolkien to them.
Chapter.
Right, yeah. No, I'd read them something like I don't know, something terrible. Anything. Like a
Oh,
Glenn
man.
Beck book. I'll read him a Glenn Beck book.
Oh my God.
You call them back. Chapter 2. Chapter 3.
Chapter 2. Yeah, that's what I want to read to him.
Well, all
Yeah.
right. Well, that was a great straw poll, Aris. These are the kind of things that I enjoy. I kind of am like thinking now. I wonder like if you did a straw poll like on the different like eras of computers, and I'm not even sure how you would do that exactly because it seems like the last 20 years is kind of muddy. Like, what's the oldest computer you've ever used? Someone like, I don't know, like Ron Singh in the chat. He's probably used some sort of a terminal from the 70s, I'm sure. I think it would be fun to, what's the oldest computer what's the first computer you ever used? Would we do something like that already? What's the first computer you've ever used? I don't know.
I think we had what was your oldest computer that you actually still use.
Oh,
I think
that's
was
still
one of
used.
the
Yeah,
polls.
is the one that you owned. Yeah.
Okay. Like, what did you grow up on? What was the first computer used in school or something like that? Would be kind of fun. I guess you could probably break it down by like I don't know how many BBC Micro users are here. Probably none right now. But anyway, be fun.
I think we would need time for that.
Or you could have a poll. What was your what was your favorite color of CRTs?
I wonder
green,
how
amber.
how many of us here have had jobs where the time clock is like a physical card you enter into the machine that it then, because I had that experience recently and it was surreal. It was like, I'm trusting this to keep track of all of my money right now. Cool.
Right.
Or the ones that you slide into, it's like goes ka-chung, like really like real hard, like
Yeah.
slam, like the automatic ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are fun.
You say that, but it probably hasn't been working for decades without needing any maintenance at all.
Oh no, that machine has been there for longer than I think I've probably been alive, for sure. That thing is industrial.
And there's no
We have
software
a poll
updates.
of yeah, exactly. Can we have a poll of
What about-
what's your favorite Backstreet Boy?
What about
Nate's
lining up
Nate's
at
mine.
work to get? What about lining up at work to get paid cash?
Oh
Nope.
man.
I've only ever had
Is that-
checks. Never had cash.
Really?
Is that legal?
Yeah, if
Did
I
you
ru-
have to
if I
make
walk
your
up-
mark?
we used to line up in the factory and they used to give cash every Thursday, every week.
Wow.
Man, you know where to hang out to rob people.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was Australia, so I'm like everybody there fights kangaroos on the weekends, so you're not gonna.
How do you know it's not the kangaroo waiting outside the factory for you?
Could be.
Yeah, real buff one, eh?
Yeah. Gotta feed my Joey somehow.
And what's some other old technology that I guess we don't see so much anymore, just kind of faded out of into obscurity?
Modem.
Well, I'll tell you what.
Film.
Linux?
No.
Modems, yeah.
The modems,
Yeah,
yeah.
modems are all gone.
Did anybody here buy the PCMCIA modems that like for your laptop that had like 2G or 3G if you were lucky? That like they were like, yeah, I had one of those.
Nah. I remember hearing
Yeah,
about
that was before.
Go ahead.
That was before they had the little hotspots.
Yeah,
Mhm.
the MiFis or
remember
whatever
I
they're
got a-
called.
Yeah, I got a hotspot, unlimited. It was awesome.
That's pretty great, yeah.
I
Yeah,
remember being envious of people who had like ThinkPads and Elite books that had the like 2G and 3G stuff built into them.
Yep.
I was like, this man, he businesses.
He business good. Yeah, I had a
Brady
Modems.
Bunch had Zoom back in the day, didn't they? Hey, Brady Bunch? They had the Zoom back in the day.
ooh, Sean Gold
Yeah, they
says
did.
paper tape for I guess for storing information, programs, data, whatever. Anybody here use
Yeah.
I got
paper
to
tape?
use one of those.
Oh yeah. It's how is it?
I can't tell if it's a severe lack of funding in my district growing up or if it's we just got to keep the extra stuff. Because we had a lot of programs from the 90s that got killed that we were still doing. So I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, but they had a really big room with a bunch of like it was like a feeder roll and everything was like punched out, and like anytime that they would have to like switch these things out to like run different like stuff to like store things on, they'd have like, I don't know, I guess they had to have like two people carry in like a big roll to like feed this machine that would like punch the tape and then feed it back through another. It was crazy. Oh, it was so cool.
I had an experience with the much maligned Scantron for tests in school. That's a similar concept.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Ugh.
those are good.
Was
There
that
was-
the one you filled in all the little bubbles? and
Mhm.
Yeah, and
with the graphite pencil.
despite what they tell you, erasing doesn't work.
Yeah, it's a
They're
lot.
like, make sure you erase it completely, and then you like touch it and it just smears, and you're like, I just got 3 questions wrong. Thanks.
It's just like the wrong kind of material. It's like it just spreads everywhere, but you can't get it off wherever you want to
Yep,
get it off.
exactly. Yeah.
And if you
There's
erase it,
there's a certain smell. I don't know how to explain it, but whenever I would do those tests, there was always a smell to the room everybody was doing those tests in.
It's
Like,
called anxiety.
Well, I think
You're
that's
probably
part of the
right.
smell, but I know what you're talking about, man. Because I remember whenever we'd get like worksheets when I was little, it was like, man, these things stink.
Yeah.
All
I
these
don't know
all
how.
these fresh copies. They're just
I could fully believe that they are carcinogen. I could really
Oh,
believe
Oh,
that.
Oh,
they've
yeah,
got
they
they've got to be.
definitely
Yeah, because when I was real little, I thought they stunk, and by the time I was in like 5th or 6th grade, I was like, yeah,
You were
get some
hooked on 'em.
worksheets into smell.
They took the asbestos out, but they're gonna get you.
Yeah,
It's like,
it's like, man,
I'm sure.
love test day.
It's like I'm sure it passed some government test. It was fine.
Oh yeah, of course.
I think there was a lawsuit by Kinko's employees or something like that because of the dust from laser printers over
Really?
time.
Wow.
Whoa,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah.
Darn you, HB.
I've had a few of those kind of puff out on me when I was working on a printer. So yeah, I can imagine that.
That and the ozone.
Oh yeah, all the ozone they produce, yeah, because of
Yeah.
the arcing. Yeah, but ozone's
And
good, right?
anyone that used the modems, did you ever play the game of guessing what speed you're going to connect at, depending on the
Based on
tones
the
it was
sound.
making?
Yeah.
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 I know,
That
when I-
tone was short. This ain't good.
When I got that 14.4 kilobaud modem, man, those are good times right there. It was lightning fast on the BBS compared to the 9600 modem.
Was anyone using Linux at the time when everything was a Win modem?
Yes.
That was rough.
Yes, and so it actually prevented me from getting into Linux.
Yeah, I believe it would.
I installed some ancient version of Red Hat. I don't know what it was, but I couldn't get on the internet. Couldn't figure it out. Luckily we had a second computer, so I could like hand write down scripts that were supposed to get my modem to connect, and then run to the other computer and type them in.
Yeah.
Nothing,
That's
man.
horrific.
And eventually sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, after a week or two, I was like, I guess this just doesn't work. I don't know. I have to put Windows back on.
Yeah, some brilliant mind out there decided to build Ndiswrapper and started solving a lot of those problems. Later
Makes
became
sense.
very useful for Wi-Fi drivers too. Anyone have to do that?
What's
I
that?
feel like I have.
Have to use Ndiswrapper to wrap a
Oh,
Windows
yeah.
driver into
For-
Linux
For
Yeah,
Wi-Fi?
yeah.
Yep.
for Wi-Fi. Yeah.
Oh,
My
It's been a long time, but yeah.
my first
Oh.
Linux machine laptop that I used, it was, it's when you broke things, you didn't know how to fix it. You had to like reinstall.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So I remember getting the Win modem to work, and I did something that broke the installation, and I could never get the Win modem to work a second time. And then like I would dork with it and try it. I just couldn't, like, whatever. I just couldn't replicate what I did prior. Yeah. So I was very disappointed.
I used the sound card for my modem in Linux.
Yeah.
That's
That's
essentially what a
funny.
Win modem was. Was a
Yeah,
sound,
yeah,
sound
but
card,
the
yeah.
sound card worked and the Min modem didn't. So,
Oh, okay. Well, there's that.
so
But you
I
had
went
working
online
audio
and
in
some
Linux.
guy said use this driver or something and this, and use your Sound Blaster sound card instead.
That's impressive.
It kind of makes you feel like using Linux, like at least a portion of using Linux is just your own personal decision to say, you say I can't do this, watch me. Like just like so
Yeah.
much of that attitude is ingrained in Linux users.
That's
Oh, it's not supposed to run on this? Give me a few minutes.
Yeah, the 1990s. Oh, good heavens! I think it's like the 700 series, the 600 series, all had the M Wave, which was a programmable DSP, and that was a good form of the Win modem, because we had users that would love to install America Online, and the modem would identify itself as a Rockwell chipset, and America Online software go, oh, you've got a really old version of the driver. Let me install a new Rockwell version for you. And it would knock out the sound and knock out the modem. I'm surprised that no one ever came up with a Linux version of that, because it was all done in software.
Yeah, I didn't remember experiencing that, but I didn't really use America Online. We had other services.
AOL was such garbage.
You've got
So
mail.
bad.
That was
And
fun
then
to-
trying to cancel the service was like you could just tell them straight up, cancel it, and they're just like, no. It's like, what do you mean no? Like, just cancel it.
I'm sorry, Dave, I cannot
They
do
would
that.
do that, and they got a lot of legal trouble for that. Like you'd say, hey, cancel it. Okay, we did, and then they just didn't. Like they had a lot of lawsuits they had to deal with in regards to that.
Oh yeah, I canceled a few cards in my bank, started getting annoyed with me, and I said, well, you stop these merchants from doing this stuff, and I'm not going to stop, then I'll stop canceling my card.
How about punch cards? I don't remember Barb. She used punch cards, I think, in college.
Mm.
I've never used a punch card. I've seen like at vintage, like computer festivals.
Punch cards.
I got a reply about that in Telegram. I forgot to say that.
Oh.
And they say I forgot punch cards, and I'm like, I'm already getting complaints and telling people that they're old.
Which ones were punch cards?
The cards about I don't know, about this big or so.
Yeah.
Which and then they would have holes punched in them, and then you'd hold them in like a box. They'd be filed in order. They'd have to be in order, and so those they feed through the computer, and if that's how your programs were stored.
That's what those were used for?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Oh my
Yeah.
God, we had those at my school, but I didn't even know that's what they were for.
So if you drop
Yeah,
your
the-
box O punch cards and they scattered everywhere, you have a bad day. Better hope the
Yeah.
number.
Yeah,
Better hope they're numbered. Yeah.
the
I
I
same
remember my
senior
buddy
text told
drawing
me
a
that.
diagonal line on them.
What's that? By diagonal line?
He would draw a diagonal line on top of them because if they ever fell, you could try to get them back in order by looking where the line was.
Right, lining up the line. Yeah.
Yeah, because it was
yeah.
easier than trying to number each one. He would just take a marker and draw a
Right.
line
Oh,
on
that
it
makes
and go,
sense,
well,
yeah.
at least I got a shot.
Right.
Jeez.
That's like your checksum. So then you can, if you do
Checksum.
And he invented checksum. He didn't even know it.
Check some hack.
Yeah,
Oh God.
that's pretty wild. Yeah, if you ever get a chance to go to like a vintage computer festival and actually see some of these like really old like teletypes and whatnot, that's actually really cool to see. So they actually have working and running tape and card machines and terminals that I'm amazed that they're still operating.
When I was in school, we had computers that had just got CD-ROMs, and they didn't have like the trays that like slide out. You had to put them in like these caddies, like these like basically like almost like a jewel case, and you put like the CD into that and close it, and then put in the caddy into the drive.
Oh yeah,
That was kind of weird. It was a Macintosh thing, I think, but
it was
yeah,
all early
that
CDs.
was kind of weird.
All early CDs had caddies. I remember looking in these computer magazines in the early '90s, and the drives, and you buy more caddies separately. Keep your CDs protected.
Now here would be an impromptu poll. What, for the people that knew the punch cards back then and actually used them, what would be harder or easier, using the flip switches on the early computers before they had punch cards, or the punch cards? Because you can imagine going click, 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 click,
Oh yeah.
shoot, back, click, 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 click.
Yeah, I don't even understand
Or
how
you
those are
start-
used. Like the old MSI 8080, or what's the other one? I can't recall what the other famous old computer is. I'm sure somebody in the chat knows.
Were they still using
the Altairs?
CRTs instead of like the actual like instead of like an actual transistor chip? Were they still using like CRTs as the actual like bits when those were a thing, or was
Some
that
of the
way
vacuum
earlier?
tubes?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Or the
No,
vacuum tube,
These
sorry.
would have been transistors
they've been
that
transistors,
they're
yeah.
talking about.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, think of the Altair
Yeah,
computer.
it's the Altair.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Nate, which color monitor do you have? Did you have the blue, the amber, or the...
I had green growing up.
Okay,
Yeah, we
I
had.
had amber.
Actually, the first computer I used was a Commodore 64, which was 16 brilliant colors, which is amazing, because the better computer in the house had garbage sound and only had green, but that's what you did all your work on. So the Commodore 64 was for fun, and the IBM PC clone was for spreadsheets and such, except for Jeopardy. I played Jeopardy with my mom on that, and that's when I got frustrated that I couldn't spell very well at, I don't know what age I was, but yeah, That's good times right there.
And my favorite was the amber VT320s. I think those looked the best.
I have a soft spot for the green Apple II monitors.
Yes.
Mm.
Especially when they're getting old and had a slight shimmer to them.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that is good times right there.
I learned that there's instructions on them that says not to like take them apart unless you really know what you're doing, and it's not really a suggestion, it's like an actual rule, because it's very
Talking about a
apparently
CRT?
they take a lot of power.
Yeah, it'll kill you.
Oh,
Yeah, well, I definitely started a small fire. And the smell of plastic took like a week to get out of the house, so it was good. I don't know. I feel like we've come a long way.
Of all the
screwdrivers.
of all the variety of blue smoke that I would let out of something, that is not something I want to let out any smoke.
It's not great.
I've seen enough like vintage computer repair YouTube videos where the CRT sparked, which was alarming in and of itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Little fun story about electricity being bad to grab. The town that I'm originally from, they had a big power outage about a month or two ago because some guys were gonna steal some copper from a substation. Yeah, they didn't get much anywhere, as you can imagine what happened to them. It's like, don't steal that out of a house in construction or anything. Nope, go right to the substation and just they don't need this.
I mean this nicely, and it's kind of a form of like social Darwinism, I suppose.
Yeah,
Mhm.
they had it coming, man. Just be honest. Like, Jesus, man.
Electricity is one of those things I've learned not to be. It's all physics, and there's a safe way to do it, and there's a safe way not to do it. But it is impressive how confident people are going into a situation where there's hot wires and there's like live capacitors, and they're just like, I'm gonna rip this apart. And
It's the one.
It's bad.
It's the one thing in my house that I really don't mess with. Like I'll put in a ceiling fan, I'll mess with the switch and stuff like that. But when it comes to like wiring, because it's the one thing that could actually kill you,
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
plumbing, like you might mess up, like whoop-de-doo, and patching drywall and like all the carpentry, like everything you can do is just like, yeah, you could hurt yourself with a tool or something, but like electricity is that I made one mistake and forgot something and like, oh, I'm dead. Like, yeah.
Gone. Yep.
Yeah, I think the most, I guess, not really scary, but I guess the most advanced thing I ever did was like change out breakers, that kind of thing.
That's
But
fun.
as long as you make sure that everything's turned off where it needs to be, you're good.
I've had the pleasure or displeasure, whichever, of doing a lot of like I've wired in a lot of circuits, like in my old house I did, and I had a really weird situation in my last house where in my basement before I moved this is long before I knew any of you guys. I wanted to set up a workshop in the back, like a workbench, and I checked the voltage, and it was like 40 volts. And I'm like, well, that's not possible. How could it be 40 volts coming out of the outlet? Anyway. So I ripped out all the wiring and I just ran new wires. But here, this is an industrial building, so I have to run everything in conduit. So I've been doing quite a bit of like conduit. I ran some new circuits and whatever. And I don't actually shut off the power for that because I know which rails are hot and those are underneath the circuits, the breakers, and I know which ones are wiring the neutral. So I don't have a whole lot of fear there. But I will say I did have a fun little incident where I was trying to figure out when I was automating the lights back here, I wanted to have a switch for the main bay because I didn't like how it was. I had to go all the way to the other side to flip a switch to make it turn on. It was really inconvenient because I use this side more than the other side. So I was going through the breakers and it was labeled like, okay, great. So I was going to disconnect that and run things, reroute it so I could I'd have a neutral because a smart switch needs to have a neutral most of the time. The ones I needed anyway. And so I did that, and then I noticed it was like strung over, and then it was like wire nutted to another, like the neutral was wire nutted to the hot of another breaker. I'm like, well, this isn't right. This is not correct at all. So anyway, so I fixed it, And then the breaker that I thought was the correct breaker actually wasn't the correct breaker anymore. So now I got identified the actual correct breaker for all the main lights. And like, okay, great. And then I wired in the switch, put in the conduit, did everything I needed to do. And I'm like, well, what does this other thing do? So I wired in and I turn on the breaker just to see what is controlled by the other thing. And it just immediately went, pow! The thing shut off, shot some sparks. I'm like, well, now I think I know what that is. So that went to the other switch, and the other side, like that was turning things on and off. So it was an interrupt. So anyway, turn it back off. And actually what I ended up doing was I did actually reactivate that circuit, but now it just powers one smart switch over there, which is basically a virtual three-way switch. And just so that tells Home Assistant to kick the lights on and everything else.
That's so janky.
Yeah, I'm still cleaning up a lot of the wiring from the previous experts that were here.
Oh my goodness! If your house gets old enough, I know we had what is it, tube and barrel, or what did they call that?
Knob and tube.
Oh,
knob and tube.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, one of my houses had that, and some of the live wiring was still through that. It's like, oh my goodness.
Yeah. I have to highlight this. Don Leckland said, I once started an electrical fire with a hammer.
Impressive.
I don't know how you could do that, but I love it. And
he probably smacked the 220 line.
Either that or he's like Thor and he's got lightning coming out of his.
That could be. Yeah. I had an uncle once who was working on he was an electrician. He was working on like the meter side of it. And he had a 2x4 he leaned up against the wall. And my dad asked him, well, what's that for? He says, well, if this thing grabs onto me, hit me with a 2x4. And once a 220 grabs
on your own, man.
Yep. Once a 220 grabs you, apparently it doesn't let go.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. So my fun experience with electricity as a kid was, being silly. We had like a laundry basket on top of the dryer where we were supposed to put our clothes. And I'm like, I'd take my socks off at the end of the school day and like just throw them like, shooting hoops, right? Well, I'm terrible at basketball still, and I was then too. And so I'd throw them and they would go over into the like behind the dryer and stuff, right? And after a while, you got a nice little pile down there. And my dad was just like, go get those. And I'm like, how am I supposed to get? He's like, figure it out. Okay. So my brilliant mind, I took like a wire clothes hanger and like unraveled it to like make a hook, right? Like a long hook I could fish it out.
Mm-hmm.
And like I'm reaching down and that hook goes into like where the 220 thing was, like just in there. And I'm just like, and I'm like on top of this metal dryer, so like I'm not grounded whatsoever, right? So I'm just like it took a lot to not like I didn't die, but like I swear my mental problems are from that. But like just like it was tough to like I couldn't let go. I was like eventually like I don't know, maybe I like wiggled enough in my violent convulsion to pull it out. But
oh my goodness.
I was like, oh, and like it took me like an hour. I was just like kind of like twitching still a little bit. Like a lot of it went through me. I'll tell you that much. And my dad still to this day, he's like, hey, I got some socks behind the dryer. Can you get them for me? And I'm just like, no, I'm good, man. You can get them, but make sure you get a plastic hook if you do so. Just yeah. Wow. So that was rough. I think I was like 10. Those bad times. Yeah.
And you went into technology after that. Oh, weird.
Yeah. I'll say I was inspired.
If you watch enough home improvement stuff on YouTube, you start to get suggestions about old like training films and like stuff like that. And one of them was about how to spot someone being electrocuted, because apparently, you lock up and you can't let go, and it's hard to tell that someone's being electrocuted.
Yeah. It ain't like the cartoons. They're not blinking, right?
Yeah, they're not shaking and blinking. They're your muscles just lock up and like you can't let go. And obviously if you're holding it long enough, it just causes cardiac arrest. But, and like I'm watching this video about and it's people recounting stories about how people, either did or didn't get killed. And these are like linemen, like people working on like, high voltage stuff. But still, like, 220 is definitely And that's just it. I mean, your body's working by the electrical impulses and your muscles just lock and you can't let go, you know?
Yeah,
It's
I'm kind of surprised I'm here today after thinking. Well, the more I think about it, the less I want to think about it. But yeah,
well, I think of the times I got shocked, right? Like dumb things like when I did touch a live wire or I touched, you know, and I guess maybe it was I just wasn't grounded well enough. Something kept me from getting really, you know, jolted. So
I was completing the
luck.
circuit. I'm really surprised I'm still here. Like, yeah.
It was
I'm
You
actually
smell
kind of
something burning?
I'm also surprised our dryer like was okay. Like nothing happened there, you know?
I just diverted the power. It wouldn't be that bad necessarily. What I'm surprised that, well, if depending on how you completed the circuit, if it was just by the hook, it's probably
Well,
what flowed.
I physically was like on top of the dryer, so
So
like
you're-
the metal frame of the
Oh,
dryer.
so you were actually completing the circuit.
Yeah, I was now
through the
part of that
dryer.
loop. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, that's not good.
And I have zero idea because like it was kind of a bit of a weird like state to be in. I don't actually know how I managed to not complete that circuit any further. But yeah, it was probably like maybe 2 seconds at most, probably less than that. But man, it felt like a while for on my end. I was like, oh no.
DC is worse to get electrocuted by than AC by a tenfold. I got shocked by my buddy's car, and it was a diesel, and it had 2 car batteries in it. And he paid nothing for it because it was a diesel, and he was going to eventually switch the motor out. And he goes, "This stupid thing doesn't run." And I go, "I think it's this thing." And I put my hand on it. That's all I did was touch it. And that shot me back about 12 feet. My arm didn't work for like a couple of minutes afterwards.
Yeah, it's like
DC is 1,000 times worse.
It's like DC when it hits you. It's like it hits your bones and your joints.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That's really pretty exciting.
Yeah, this one felt more like my muscles, not so much my.
Yeah.
Oh, DC is 1,000 times worse.
It's like working on a monitor. When I first got into IT, I was being trained on working on the minis, which so like the basically the ones that look like a dishwasher or like a dryer. It has the monitor and has the keyboard molded into the body, you know, and they had the high voltage side and they had the low voltage side. And the low voltage side was what we would consider in our computers today that would take the 120 down to whatever voltage was needed for the drives back then and stuff, probably the same 12 volts. But you had the high side, which went to the monitor, and that's where you had the caps that had 40,000 volts. And if you didn't discharge them, you had a problem. Because we had this, I remember one of the senior techs was showing me, it was really weird. I had a probe and I had a light bulb on the end of it, like a little LED on the end of it. And you had the probe and you had an alligator clip. And you would go in and find a ground point, and then you go in and probe everything. And if that light shined up, you had a shunt. It was like a shunt resistor, and it was basically a probe. They had a big, and you had like a glove you put on, and it had a rubber handle, and you go in there and touch it, and it would discharge the cap or whatever circuit you're working on. Yeah, and I thought I had everything discharged, and I'm trying to find the taps on find the power supply lead going to what I was working on. And my hands started sweating, and then like, where's pen? My fingers start sweating, and I'm holding the conductor like this with my finger, and my sweating, my fingers are sliding down the probe until I was holding the wire.
Oh no.
And I went to go and I got bounced off the wall, like Ginger was saying. Yeah. The next thing I remember was one of the other junior techs going, "Dale's dead! Dale's dead!" And I open my eyes and I look at him and I said, Stop yelling.
It's not dead. I just wish maybe.
Yeah, I'm just sleeping.
Yeah.
Million
Siesta.
rolls, you have to have a nap.
I think that's the thing that gets me. Like batteries, I can generally deal with. Like I'm more worried about the chemical components in batteries than the actual power most of the time. But capacitors, on the other hand, they're the ones that scare me because it's everything. You're instantly there's no like delay, there's no trickle. It's everything at once, and it's horrible. It's a mistake you never make twice.
No forgiveness.
It's like the lightning caps for cars.
Mm.
Yeah, you don't want to touch a
Yep.
starter.
Well, like
Yeah.
like an old CRT monitor too. You know, lots of people got hurt from playing around with TVs and CRT monitors and stuff
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a truck years ago that had a bad starter, and they were trying to get me to the terminal to get it replaced. And we had a sledge I think I had a 4-pound or 5-pound sledge for like knocking the brakes loose on the trailer, because there was like a millimeter or two gap between where the brake shoes touch the drums on the trailer, and a little bit of water can get in there and freeze them to there. And sometimes the spring, when you apply air, isn't enough to break it through. So basically, you just go up and just tap them real lightly, and they'll break loose. So they asked me, and this one day I'm at this place where I was delivering, and I couldn't start the truck. And they told me, this is when I first started driving, and they're like, "Do you have your sledgehammer?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He said, "Do you know what the starter looks like?" I think so. It's the little silver thing with the 2 leads going into it that otherwise looks nondescript. And I'm like, yeah. So you go up to it. It's like it has the you can see the stators and the things wrapped around, and they're like, just tap it. I go, are you sure this is a good idea? I mean, I don't want to be completing a circuit with 5 pounds of steel. And I go up and tap it, and sparks started shooting out of it. And I'm like, truck started. But I think I aged myself like 5 years because I jumped almost through the hammer.
Oh, man.
Yeah, because what they use to start a semi is pretty heavy duty.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Not a small engine right there.
Oh no.
Before we get too late, Eric, did you brought up the in the show notes? You've been given yet another old laptop.
Oh yeah,
Oh, yeah,
yeah.
here we
I was pretty pleased by this. So my in-laws just keep giving me old computers that they've stopped using and I guess just had laying around. And so the last one I talked about, I don't remember if I talked about it here, but I talked about it on Distro Hopper's Digest if I haven't mentioned it here. And it was a pretty nice system, not that old. I kind of cleaned it up and gave it to my daughter. And so they give me this one, which is a Dell Inspiron 17R N7110, which is, I think, the 2011 model. And it has a Sandy, what is it? Not Sandy Lake, it's Sandy Bridge. Thank you. Intel i5 2410M. And it has onboard graphics, and it had 4 gigs of RAM, and I upgraded it to 8 once I got it working well. And so it has Windows 10 on it. I started it up and it's just screaming. The fan is, screaming away. And I thought, okay, well, this thing just obviously is old and can't really run well. But I looked at the task manager and I noticed that the CPU usage really wasn't very high. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe the thermal, it's just filthy. The fan's filthy or it's plugged up or something. So I decided to take it apart. And this is the kind where there's one little place on the bottom where you can put in extra memory, but otherwise you have to take all the screws off and then the keyboard comes off, and then the whole top deck comes off, and that's how you get to the board and everything. So it's like a whole thing to to rip this thing apart. And so I get it all apart, get the board. You have to actually take the board out because the thermal pipe and everything's on the bottom. And so, you know, just every little bit of this is like, I'm gonna break it. I know I am. But anyway, I took the thermal off, and the paste was very dry, and it didn't look like it was making good, you know, a good connection between them. So I cleaned it all up, put some fresh paste on it, put it all back together, and it actually worked. And now I can't believe it, but this thing, as old as it is, actually runs, and this is Windows, so I assume it would run Linux better, but like the fan is quiet, the system runs really well. I mean, I've got Firefox running, and I mean, this i5 processor, you know, 2.3 gigahertz for its dual core, 4 threads, and it's enough. I mean, I was playing with it today because I have to get their data off of it for them, and I'm just, you know, playing around on it. And it occurred to me that like I could probably actually use this machine to work on. Now it's kind of ridiculous because it's one of those old 15-pound, 17-inch glossy black plastic, shows every fingerprint, you know, like you couldn't carry it anywhere because it's ridiculously high. I don't even think it would fit in my backpack. That's how big it is. But it actually, for being so old, runs really well. And like I said, that's Windows 10. I could imagine if I put Linux on it, it's going to run even better. So I don't think I'm going to keep it. My wife actually brought up, I have a couple young cousins who don't have a computer their parents have a computer that I don't think they want their little kids beating on. So this could be a good candidate for that. But yeah, just I was just amazed at how this seemingly, you know, old useless computer just needed someone to repaste the CPU, and all of a sudden it runs great.
I looked up the CPU benchmark score, and it's 1943, so 1943, which I guess really isn't terrible, and probably like if you're not doing anything processor intensive, I mean I don't see why that wouldn't do well, really. So I mean, browsing the web, doing basic office things.
Well, having 4 gigs of RAM was a big deal. Like I was running out of memory. I mean, it's Windows is taking over 2 usually. And so very little headroom there to actually do much. And Firefox takes up, you know, another 2. So it was paging out to the disk. I realized that I had done work on this computer years ago and put an SSD in it, a 250 gig SSD. So you can tell how long ago that was. But yeah, once I realized, I had just upgraded the memory in my Dell, my modern Dell, but it's DDR4, and so I needed DDR3 for this. So I pirated it out of another old computer and put 8 gigs in, and that made a big difference. But the worst part, the touchpad is basically unusable. It's garbage. And then the screens, it's amazing how the new panels, I mean, new being in the last, you know, 8 years, you know, how clear and crisp and, you know, bright they are versus those old ones that just, they're so, you know, opaque and cloudy, and it's really hard to get a good angle. You know, you're kind of like looking around to try to find that just right, very narrow view angle. So anyway, yeah, it just, I love I just love that feeling, you know, you're something that's essentially useless, that the person that owned it doesn't want it anymore. They've given it to me, and I'm able to sort of breathe new life into it. And it's always a good feeling.
Yeah, I kind of wonder like how hard you could actually push this thing as far as like, you know, make it, how useful could you make it and whatnot.
Right.
Those are kind of fun things. That whole adage, it's more fun to drive a fast, it's more fun to drive a slow car fast than a fast car slow, right? So
it does occur to me though, for most people, like if they're just browsing the web and watching videos or whatever basic stuff that someone's going to do, like it's amazing how usable it is for those types of things. Yeah, I think if you were trying to encode video or build build stuff, like you'd probably notice a big difference, but for just normal stuff, I mean, it worked great.
Yeah, that's cool.
So
it's nice when you bring something back to life that was basically going to be e-waste and now it can be functional again. And and if you give it to a kid and their first computer, something they learn on and bang on, then when they're old, they say, yeah, back when I had to use a second generation i5, man, can you believe that second generation i5? Man, that's old. Anyway, that's good times right there. So it's about that time to discuss next week. It's a distro exploration, and we gotta choose a distro. So Aris is whispering in my ear that he's not actually, but he's telling me that Solus has refreshed an ISO with many little changes, and it might not be a bad thing to maybe check that out, see how see if there's what new life in Solus looks like. Maybe Peter might join us. We say Solus 3 times in a row. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on taking Solus out for a spin?
Yep, good idea, I reckon.
Yeah, I've always liked Solus.
So Swift says awesome in the chat here, and Joseph DeGarmo, he's saying Q4OS version 5. We're definitely gonna put that on the list for sure. And thank you, Steve, for you're telling us a great organic conversation. Yeah, it'd have been even more organic if you were here because I know how crunchy you are. So does that sound good? Does anybody have any heartburn over Solus?
Nope. I think it's about due for a refresh because that ISO was getting really long in the teeth. Yeah. I mean, you couldn't even boot in some of the new Intels or some of the new Ryzen processors because the kernel was so old.
Interesting. Wow. Well, excellent. So looks like getsol.us. I know there's been, I think Ike has rejoined the project, and then I know that
Josh also.
Josh, yep, he's come back to the project as well. So I know there's talk about that, and this might be some very exciting times for Solus. They needed some good, strong personalities, I think, to drive the thing.
Yeah, they're
going to go. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say there's like 3 or 4 other people that I'm not sure if they were pre-existing, but there are like 3 or 4 other people that are on the team now.
Cool.
And they're looking at going full Wayland, and this will be the last version for Mate. Apparently, they're going to drop Mate as well.
Okay.
Do an XFCE version from what I've heard. So that's interesting.
This is my completely uninformed opinion, but I almost kind of feel like they should just really stick to Budgie. Make Budgie is absolutely the best they can possibly make it. Focus on that. Don't distract from other things. If someone else wants to do like in Fedora, an unofficial spin or whatever, fine. Go forth, do great things. But I think the Solus team as a core team should focus really on the really unique things that made Solus really amazing 5 years ago. Just kind of keep along track along that line.
I think especially when you're a distribution that develops their own desktop environment, it's really important that you heavily focus on making that experience as best as it can be. And, it's not that the other versions aren't as good, but the reality of it is you can only do so much man hours into each desktop and testing each thing and making sure everything works without breaking other things anytime there's a change. It's part of why I appreciate Elementary OS so much, is that they have a focus, they settle on it, and even when it's they do some controversial sort of changes that aren't really traditional, but they make it work.
I think that's part of the charm, though, because they do those things that are controversial. They do those changes that maybe are a little bit grating. I think that's a great way to push Linux as a whole in another direction. It kind of widens widens that umbrella. It doesn't. I don't think it takes away necessarily, but like I don't like what GNOME does, but I think what they're doing is good because they're forcing another idea out there that you can take it or leave it.
I agree with you though, Nate. I think I was a big Budgie fan when it first came out, and then they were making great progress on the desktop itself with Budgie, and then the expectation of everyone else, I want a KDE version, I want this version, I want that version. Then soon as all that started happening, the Budgie desktop sort of came to a complete halt as far as progress was concerned. And I think you're right. I don't know where Joshua sits with this group now, because he was doing buddies of Budgie, probably still is, which is, he was meant to be putting the Budgie desktop with what's that EFL, is it? EFL?
Yeah.
He's meant to be
the
Enlightenment, yes.
Foundation libraries.
Yeah, yep. So I don't know whether he's still doing that or whether they're just now focusing on Solus. I'm not really sure about where they stand with that. But
I don't think it changes the relationship that he's had with other distributions. I think it's a re-emphasis, bringing focus back to Solus, which has kind of lost momentum. I would say in many ways, especially with their website down for a long time and all these different little weirdness that things that happened. So I think this is a good sign. We'll see how it goes.
I think it came down to just Data Drake at one point and a few other people. And I think she has left the project, and now it's Josh and Ike and a lot of other people are taking over the project.
Okay.
So
yeah, I think she left.
It's meant to be based on Serpent. They're going to be basing it on Serpent OS, aren't they? I think, is that what the plan was? I believe.
Eventually, yes.
Eventually, eventually, yeah.
Aris and I discussed that. Sorry, Shepherd.
Oh, no.
No, it's Aris and I briefly chatted about this, and I can't remember one of the Telegram groups. I can't remember which one because I can never remember or keep track.
Or Linux user space. Sorry.
But we discussed that. I think I posted it in. I'm thinking it's either in our group or it was in the one that Leo and Dan, Linux user space. It was one of those two groups. And I think I found the original link from April when Joshua made the announcement of the new village, I think is how he crafted it. And I can't remember exactly what it was because I read it briefly in between my cleaning here in my apartment. If I remember correctly, when Ike left to start Serpent, he used some of the build environments and stuff that he was used to when he was building Solus. And then he was updating it because it was needing to be updated. And I don't know about how development things work, tools that they have to do. But when they decided to come back to join back in with Solus, they said that they were going to use what they learned the past few years developing Serpent, because as far as I know, at the current state of Serpent is it'll boot to a terminal. There is no GUI for anything. They don't have X working on it. They don't have Wayland working on it. There was no mention of any window managers, any desktop environments working on it. So I'm thinking it's more of, I don't want to say this to sound mean or disparaging, but I think what they learned while lost in the woods is going to make Solus better.
Okay.
Because I have no doubts that Ike is very talented and very capable of doing what he's setting out to do. But I think it's more of they're updating what they were using. And they pretty much are just taking some of the things, like I said, they learned because I think, if I'm not mistaken, Serpent was going to be using its own type of framework. I don't think they were using anything, because I think when Ike originally announced this in 2017 or 2018, somewhere around there, he made a mention that Solus was written from the ground up. Nothing was taken from any of the other projects except for Clearboot. He used, because he was using Gummy Boot, which eventually became System D Boot when the System D project incorporated it. And then I believe he took, for a period of time, he took the Clear Linux boot manager from Clear Linux and used it. And then there was a discussion where another one, I think it was Norbert or somebody else in the chat was thinking that they were using System D now, but I don't know. But
I really like what you said about having a time when they got lost in the woods, and that because of those prior experiences, that it'll make Solus a better distro than ever. I really hope that that actually takes place, as you stated, because it's an awesome distribution that I feel deserves more than what it does.
Yeah.
And one of the things regarding Solus, like so many other, well, like various other projects, is that sometimes you come across what I like to call Linux vultures. Well, they'll see a problem, and rather than pitch in and see what they can do to assist, they'll say whatever negative comments they can make. And I think that's completely and totally unnecessary.
Yeah.
If you don't want to use a distro, don't use it. That's it's not hard to do. You know, people that use Windows, you don't have as many choices as with Linux. If you use Mac OS X, you don't have as many choices. With Linux, you have a plethora of distributions. Something's bound to fit what you want to do 9 times out of 10. You know, and so it's no need to be that way, but simply, you know, work with your brothers, so to speak, your sisters or whoever, because Linux is a family. It should be a family, and we should work with one another and not fight one another.
Yeah, I agree. And I always, like, when we do distribution explorations, you know, our intent is to talk about the different aspects of them and not poo-poo on them. You know, try and not necessarily, you know, don't ignore the flaws, but don't go into an ad hominem type attacks, or just say that something's garbage when it's, you know, it's a work in progress. You know, it's a passion project. It's something people are working on these things out of a labor of love. They're not doing these because, you know, they're making money, because they're not.
And we shouldn't mention what Red Hat's doing.
Wow.
I'm always
Mic
excited
drop.
whenever I hear that that IT is working on something, and you know, we generally like shouldn't idolize anyone, and this is more so just a matter of just having an incredible amount of respect for his talent, because he has a really, really incredible ability to see things from a very technical scope, see exactly how he wants to structure something and build it in the most direct way as possible. And you know, I watched him code things live, and I've watched him work on projects, and he works at a pace and with just a level of organization and structure that I don't understand. I admire very, very much. So when I like the idea of him working on Solus, because I really feel like having somebody with that kind of ability, but also just that presence to push things, it's critical.
Yep, he's got the personality for it.
He does. It's just like I remember when he was actually on Telegram pretty often. It's times I got to speak to him way back, probably like 2016, 2017, something like that. Maybe 2018. Okay. But I appreciated being able to talk to him. In fact, one time I told him about a program I wanted, that he packaged it right then and there. And I thought that was cool. You know, to have that kind of access to Ike, you know, was cool. I mean, yeah, he ran into foolishness on Telegram and left, but I'm glad to see that he's back involved with Solus,
Mhm.
and I look forward to the full speed ahead, basically.
Yeah, I've had some fun conversations with them back then on IRC, and it wasn't even about Linux. They were this cool people to hang out with. I remember we had this whole discussion about pineapple on pizza, and I can't remember what country Ike is from, but he was talking about what teasing us about American pizza, where it's like a crime against humanity.
I believe he's Irish.
He's Ireland, yeah. It's from Ireland.
Yeah. So funny, we had that conversation a little while ago on Matrix. That popped up. That's why it was hilarious. You brought up the pineapple on pizza, because I love pineapple on pizza. It's like the best thing ever. Oh my God.
I don't normally get offended. We're sidetracking. I was going to try and close this thing out, but now you just brought up food. There was someone who was talking about like, oh, I really love Chicago-style pizza. I live pretty close to Chicago. I'm sure Steve's very own will agree that Chicago-style pizza is really good. And then this person, they were not from the U.S. I can't believe somewhere Europe or Australia, someplace crazy. No offense, Colin, but you live in a crazy town or city or country. Anyway, they described Chicago pizza like a sad lasagna, and I laughed, but my heart was broken at the same time because it's probably true.
It is true. It's still delicious.
It's basically lasagna pizza.
Yeah. Anyway, so I thought it was hilarious, and I was offended all at the same time, but not like real offended. Just
I don't know. I don't know where this discussion comes from with the pineapple on. I mean, we have pineapple on pizza over here. It's called Hawaiian, right?
Yeah,
and it's the most popular one. But I don't know why. I mean, obviously, it's like Linux. If you don't like it, don't have it. Don't order it. But pineapple on pizza is just, for me, is normal. But obviously, for some other people, it's not.
So,
for some other countries.
Don Lackland said pineapple ham and jalapenos, and that's exactly how we like it. I think that's great. And then, although Ulfnick, he said pineapple, broccoli, and ham does it for me. I'm not sure.
Oh, dude, broccoli on pizza is so good, man. Oh,
I haven't tried that before. I might try that.
It just sounds good.
Okay, I can dig it. Yeah.
Maybe like a garlic.
In another life, I used to be a pizza delivery guy, and for Extreme Pizza. I don't know if they have them in the various other states, but broccoli on pizza is one of the things they'd serve, and it was so good. Like, you guys have no idea. It's amazing. You got to try it with pineapple and maybe pepperoni or ham.
So I have to answer a question. Guru the Digital. Anytime you have a LAN party with a bunch of computer nerds, there's always pizza involved. So it always will devolve into pizza at some point in time. That's just how it works. It's it's just one of the laws of nature. You can't.
Yeah. So I noticed this last week. We got off of this call, and I was like, dude, I need pizza. I need pizza so bad. Yeah, it's gonna happen again.
True. I'll have to resist the urge.
I had pizza earlier. That's okay.
What happens.
I propose pizza is not a real thing, but rather a concept, just like a sandwich is. So if you ask for a sandwich, like, what are you getting? And the same thing I think with pizza, right? Like, don't think of it as a pizza. Think of it as the idea of pizza. It is the delivery vessel for ingredients.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, I agree, man.
Couldn't say anything better.
Can we all agree that anchovies should be banned?
Anchovies.
How dare
we
you?
all agree. I think we can come
How
together.
dare
That's
you?
a come together moment.
You need to go away now. How dare you?
You see, as far as U.S. politics goes, anchovies could bring our country together. Because we could all agree that they should be abolished.
Anchovies is one of those few things that I actually share with my mother-in-law that we like.
Is it the one thing?
I feel like
One
I
of the
learned a
few
lot.
things.
Oh, that's beautiful. All right, so just for some quick housekeeping, if you have any suggestions for a distribution, I got yours, Joseph. Don't worry. A application, any poll ideas, please feel free to send them to suggestions@linuxsaloon.com or any one of our social things out there, Telegram, Discord, etc., Discourse forum, all those things. So yeah, send any suggestions for any ideas you might have anytime. And unlike Adam, I love email. Actually, email is my favorite form of communication for some things. Not everything. I do like live chat as well. That's also fun. All right, so it is closing time. And I just want to go through here and see if anybody has any things to push. So we have Eric and Dale, both part of the Distro Hoppers Digest. And if anybody want to talk about what's coming up.
We just recorded episode 44, so that should be out probably next week. Oh wait, I mean it will be out next week, but probably early in the week. And yeah, I think it's another good episode. I'm not going to ruin it for you, but yeah, we all had there was a lot. I won't ruin it, but there was a lot of talk about Debian's new release, so that was good to get some insight on that. And yeah,
excellent.
Yeah, it reminds me, we have to listen to the edit yet. That's one thing I forgot to do today.
Yeah, I haven't had time.
Yeah, I haven't even looked to see how long it is because the unedited was 1 hour and 33 minutes. So
yeah, long
chat. Well, excellent. I think Steve's very own. He's doing. I think I clicked on the notification that he's going to be doing his show tomorrow. That's a Coffee Clash every Sunday morning at 8 a.m. Central or 9 a.m. Eastern. I'm not sure what Pacific. You can check that out. I haven't seen. Mark wasn't here today, but you can check out the Atlanta Linux Enthusiast Group, ale.org, every 3 p.m. on Eastern on Sundays. He gets together with a group of incredibly intelligent people and helps people hash through problems and mostly Linux but tech and sometimes odd things. But you have to manage your conversation on that one. Linux User Space is on break for the summer, but they are doing some live streams, so stay tuned to their Twitch or actually their Discord group. They'll go live there. That's where I have to listen to it when they do go live. I'm on a podcast called Linux Out Loud. We didn't record last week. We had there's some issues, some time things, so these things happen. I did edit the previous one on my Framework laptop. Just thought I'd throw it out there. So that was actually a fun episode. I have a website called cubiclenate.com. I actually have a bunch of articles in the works. I just have to finish them. So there's that. I have one that's completely non-Linux related. It's concerning setting up a Microsoft Teams room and how angry I am about Microsoft's poor documentation and how Logitech doesn't know how to use their own hardware. But I will put it together in the nicest possible way. But in case someone else has to do this, how to set that up. So anyway, nothing to do with Linux, but I'll probably try and shove something Linux in there somehow, just because I have to do that for my own peace of mind. Did anybody else have anything you want to say? I think, Colin, you might be working on some videos.
Oh, not yet. Just finding time and availability. As at the moment, it's not a thing. So
right, I understand.
I'll get there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, don't give up. I don't know if Schickler, you got anything going on? Anything exciting?
Not personally, but for those of you excited about the potential of putting Fedora on the newer app Silicon Max. I don't know if I mentioned it. There's now an official Fedora special interest group for Sahi Fedora. So that will eventually become its own Fedora spin. So give them some support. Pretty cool. I know there's a lot of people that are like, I want the hardware, but I don't want to run macOS. It's a great way to avoid that. So,
cool. So Asahi Linux, basically a spin of that.
Theaters and VHS.
Yeah, VHS would be great. Asahi Linux on the a Fedora version of Asahi Linux. I think that's pretty cool. That's excellent. Anybody else have anything they want to push? Jinda, you probably have. Aren't you like a big gaming YouTuber now or something like that?
Oh, sorry, no.
No, okay, I didn't think so, but I just thought I'd throw it out there. Anybody else? No. Ryan? Oh,
Yeah,
both Nick?
when
Yes.
this yeah, it'll be a bit late when the show comes out, but tomorrow I'm doing a drop-in workshop for installing your own AI on Linux.
Sweet.
Basically, if people just need help working their way through guides that I'm going to put on the forum, they can get it there.
Are you doing like a live stream?
No, it's just gonna be on Jitsi. Very casual.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been through the ringer on installations, and I don't want other people to have to, have as difficult a time as I did. So
cool.
Yeah, I figured I'd just do it ad hoc. So yeah, it's on the forum. I'll post a link, and EST it's 2 p.m. London time it's 7 p.m. But there's a timestamp which is normalized to your region on the forum, so it's easy to know when it is, and that's where the link will be. So yeah.
Excellent. Make sure I include that link somewhere. Although it's tomorrow, so when the show goes live, I guess it won't be any good. But I'll still post the link on there anyway, so maybe people can glob on that.
Right. See it post tense. See the complaints at the bottom of the thread.
Right. Excellent. Linux Saloon is part of the Tux Digital Network, so check out more great shows at tuxdigital.com. I want to thank you all for your support, however you do it, being a part of this conversation here in Zoom or trolling in the YouTube chat as well. I always enjoy a good troll. Unless you're a robot troll, then you're not very good, so don't do that. And all of you that watch the show after the fact, thank you for that as well. I want to thank everyone involved for making Linux and open source tools possible for us to not only have this conversation, but also to have fun and enjoy technology. Linux truly puts personal back in our personal computers. Thank you for stopping by. Be sure to tip your developers, and please remember to Linux responsibly. Until next time, see yas.
Bye.
The fact that you're making... But anyway, yeah, very cool. Does anybody else have but the so
if you've never looked at
oh no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say,
and
well, not only that,
yeah. Oh, I was gonna mention the replies, but go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, so
yeah, my grandmother.
Yeah, I think
yeah. Dale, we can hear you. You're just quiet, bud. Dale, I can hear you. You're just quiet, bud. You just go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, let me turn it up because I had it.
You're all right now.
Yeah, you sound okay. There's people who are
better?
stepping on you.
Yep.
Yeah, it's fine.
That much better.
There was a bit of old technology that I was thinking about, and then totally lost my train of thought. Thanks, Adam. Yeah, no problem.
Steam engines.
I've seen them. Never actually used them.
But
yeah, it's
the worst part. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say it. And we're off.
I'm not trying to complain, but does Shickle sound that bad for everyone else?
Yeah, you were kind of clipping in and out.
Oh, was I?
Yeah.
Something's wrong. Sounds like
super
a
choppy for some reason.
sound like crap. Fix your crap.
How's that? Is that a slight improvement?
Yep.
Yeah, it's way better.
Yeah.
Is that going
Yeah, I can see you again.
Voice isolation.
Oh.
Allegedly.
Yeah.
All right, gents, I've got to go. I'll see you all next week. Have a great week, everybody.
Thank you. Try not to get into a fight with a kangaroo.
Yeah, try my best.
Protect your cash.